Overlord Volume 13 Chapter 6 Gunner and Archer Part 1. After leaving Caspion's room, the first place Nia went was the archery range. Nia's subordinates had been waiting there, and they immediately flocked to her. As her friends went, "How did the meeting turn out, Miss Baraha? We're always ready to go," and other such things. Nia told them about the meeting. She told them everything, what had happened, what had been said, and the conclusions they had reached. Most of them hunted for a living, and they were all excellent outdoorsmen. Even they could not help but nod grimly at Caspion's conclusion. There was no doubt that searching the hills would be extremely difficult. That being the case, an early dispatch of a search party seemed impossible. However, they could conduct a simple search within the Holy Kingdom, heading east from this place to the fortress line. Since it was unclear where the Sorcerer King had landed, he might be within the Holy Kingdom's borders. Several people skilled in ranger techniques stepped forward. Nia wanted to take part as well, but she had practically no ranger skills, so she would only get in the way if she accompanied them. This was an operation to rescue a righteous king who had reached a helping hand out to save the people of another country. As his squire, not being able to go felt like disloyalty, and it gnawed at Nia's heart. She felt like screaming the way she had done at Remedios, but nothing would come of it even if she did so. Nia told everyone that they had received Caspion's permission to search within the Holy Kingdom's borders, but she could not take part herself. "Leave it to us, Miss Baraha. We'll keep our eyes open while searching for His Majesty. We won't miss a single clue about our great benefactor." "All right, everyone. Once the prince gives his permission, I'll be counting on all of you." Nia bowed deeply to them. "Miss Baraha, what will the rest of us do? How can we be useful to the Sorcerer King?" As everyone looked at her with zeal in their eyes, Nia was filled with delight. They did not think that the Sorcerer King was dead, even after witnessing that scene. "That's right. How could His Majesty be dead? I'm sure he must be waiting for us to rescue him." I think. Nia could not imagine a scenario where that Supreme Being would wait for these people to rescue him. For all she knew, they would probably find him elegantly sipping a glass of fine wine in front of a pile of demi-human and demon corpses. "All right, then everyone who's left will start trying, because weakness is a sin." Indeed, that was all Nia could do now. She had to become strong enough to be of some small use next time. If she and her people had been strong enough, the righteous Sorcerer King would not have ended up like this. "Oh," she received a spirited answer. That was because everyone understood what Nia meant when she said, "The Sorcerer King is justice and weakness is a sin." Not many people had agreed with those words when this unit had first been formed, but after mingling with them, more people had come around to her point of view. "Then I'll go to see the prince." After speaking directly with Caspion, the search party was quickly granted permission to move out. They had left on the day itself, and 3 days had passed since then. While things might have gotten troublesome if the members of the search party had not been of one mind, the fact was that all of them had been chosen because they agreed with Nia's proposal, and so they had left without delay. While rumors of taking back Kalincha had circulated through the city during these 3 days, the Liberation Army had not actually made any moves and merely let time pass aimlessly. The exception was Nia and the increasing number of people who had come to accept the Sorcerer King as justice. They diligently applied themselves to their training. Nia let loose an arrow at the target, an irritated look on her face. Her anxiety and anger had probably made her hand slip because the arrow embedded itself just slightly off the center of the target. Normally, someone would have come over to lightly chide Nia, but nobody dared address Nia now. The reason for that was Nia's face. Her anxiety over not being able to do anything for the Sorcerer King and a lack of sleep due to a lack of news meant that the area around her eyes was swollen and discolored, which made her look horrible, especially when one factored in the wrinkles between her brows as well. Since she typically concealed her face with her visor, it had a great impact on others when she removed it. While Nia's subordinates keenly understood how she felt, nobody dared come near her. Your Majesty, 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 Your. These words tumbled round and round in Nia's head. Honestly, the shoulders of all the archers around Nia trembled as they heard those quiet words. Majesty. No. I need to calm down. Calm down. It's only been 3 days. Just the eastern region of the Holy Kingdom is large enough as it is. You don't want to scare the others, do you? Nia took off her visor, and heard something like a strangled scream from someone who had happened to look her way, then massaged her temples lightly as she tried to relax her stiff face. Just then, Nia heard 2 sets of footsteps running towards the archery range. Given that she could hear a metallic clinking which was unique to chain shirts, they were not militiamen who had come here to train. Paladins wore armor of metal plates, so it could not have been them either. They were probably somewhat higher-ranked soldiers or colleagues, squires. Squire Nia Baraha. When Nia turned to face the people who had barged in, the 2 men who had shown up simultaneously stepped back and cried out. What's going on? Did something happen? Weren't you the ones with something to say? Nia thought as she replied. It's been a while. That's the usual reaction. No, maybe it's a little more than the usual reaction. These 2 people were also squires, and they had been trained alongside Nia. That said, she knew next to nothing about their characters since she had barely spoken to them, but at the very least she still remembered their names and faces. If Nia knew them, then they must also have known Nia. That would mean they ought to have been used to Nia's murderous eyes. Even so, the fact that they had reacted this way showed how terrifying Nia's face was now. Speaking of which, Nia recalled that they too had been freed from prison camps. Yes. I usually don't look like this, like I hate the entire world. I think. No, am I usually like that? Nia rubbed her face and mused that maybe she should not take off the visor. Sorry. It seems you need me for something. What is it? No, Prince Caspond is looking for you. Please report to him right away. Prince Caspond? Why was he looking for her? She had a few ideas, but she did not know which one was correct, so all she could do was pray that he was seeking her out for a good reason. I understand. Please tell him I'll be coming right away. However, they did not look like they were leaving, even after she had given her answer. It puzzled Nia. What is it? Is there anything else? No, it feels a little, well, it's not your face, but maybe it's the air around you. It feels like the air around you has changed. I know I can't express it too well in words. Well, I'd be glad if it was a good change. But we're all going to change. We've all been through so much. Yes. You're right. It's just like what you said, Baraha. The 2 of them smiled tiredly. She did not know whether they had bought it. They said, "We'll talk again some other time," and then they left. Nia told her subordinates looking at her about how she was going to see Caspond, and then she headed out. Caspond still stayed in the same building as before, but he was in a different room now. That was because Jeldabeth had smashed a huge hole in the previous room's wall when he had shown up. Nobody stopped her on her way to the room, even with her visor on, and she reached it with no problems. During this time, nobody had asked her to leave behind the bow on her back either. There was no telling if it was because they trusted her, or because they were mindful of the fact that the bow had been borrowed from the Sorcerer King. Prince Caspond, this is Squire Nia Baraha reporting. Caspond was sitting inside the room, and 2 paladins stood beside him, Remedios and Gustav. Nia immediately fell to one knee. I'm glad you came. We've been waiting for you. That's fine. Don't worry about it, just stand up. Nia stood as requested, and then asked, I apologize for keeping you waiting. May I know your bidding? Before that, remove the item covering your face, Squire Nia Baraha. Those matter-of-fact words came from Gustav. Common sense indicated that she ought to have done so. Yes. Please forgive me. After Nia removed her visor, Gustav's eyes widened slightly. Ah, are you not feeling well? Would you like the priests to examine you? No, I don't feel that bad yet. Since explaining was troublesome, Nia decided to press on. Now then, may I ask what's the matter? Well, about that. Well, there's one more person who will be joining us besides the four of us here. I'm going to get them now, so don't be too shocked, alright? She could see a look of distaste on Remedios's face from the corner of her eye. If it could put a look of disgust on the captain's face, it was probably related to Jaldabaoth. And then the word, Maid Demon, suddenly came to Nia's mind. After hearing Caspion's order, Gustav opened a side door and spoke to the person within. And then, a monster emerged before them. Nia knew what species it was. It was of Zirn. While it was a species with a shiny carapace, its appearance was not offensive. However, there was a faint, almost imperceptible smell of bloodshed surrounding it. What's a demi-human like that doing here? Nia wondered. Caspian seemed to sense this, and he spoke. She is an envoy. So Jaldabaoth's envoy is here, is that it? Nia unconsciously let her hostility show, and the Zirn twitched like it was going on the defensive. Hold it, Squire Baraha. It seems you're slightly mistaken. She is not Jaldabaoth's envoy. It is the opposite. She is an envoy of those people who plan to rebel against Jaldabaoth. Nia could not help exclaiming in surprise. Caspian seemed to have expected that response, and laughed. You look surprised. Well, that's only to be expected. Surely you didn't expect anyone to rebel against Jaldabaoth's subjugation of the demi-humans, did you? However, there are people like that. According to the envoy Dono, not all demi-humans serve Jaldabaoth wholeheartedly. For instance, these Zirns. There are other species like the Zirn who have no choice but to help Jaldabaoth because their ruling class, their royal family, was taken hostage. What they want is to rescue those hostages. Precisely. Nia had never heard that female voice before and it startled her. She looked around the interior of the room. Finally, just as she was about to go, no way, her eyes landed on the Zirn. That voice would have sounded perfectly fine coming from a human being. From where on its repulsive body did its human-like voice come from? Was this a special ability of the Zirns, or was it a kind of magical power? The city you humans call Kalinsha, which is 5 days' travel to the southwest, holds someone important to us. We ask that you save him. Nia conjured up a map of the Holy Kingdom in her head. From her previous words, the city of which the Zirn spoke was indeed Kalinsha. Of course, it was closer to west-southwest than the southwest, and she wondered if traveling there would really take 5 days, but everything else was within the margins of error. However, there was one thing she did not understand. Why were they telling Nia about this? However, before Nia could contemplate the reasons for that, Caspian said something shocking. That is why we have decided to ally with them to fight against Jaldabaoth, Miss Baraha. Nia could not help but doubt her ears. Could they trust a species like the Zirn, monsters who did not even have facial features to read? While we were forced about Jaldabaoth's power, and invaded this place as part of his army, we received news that our king, who was being held hostage in the Abelian Hills, was killed by demons. As for the other one, the prince who is being held prisoner as a symbol of our submission. Now that the previous king has been killed, he is our new king. If you rescue him, we will help you. Did they kill him because they did not need 2 hostages? Or was there a more fiendish reason for the killing? While she could not read that deeply into matters, it would seem the important thing was that their king had been killed. That said, we are preparing to take our new king somewhere that Jaldabeth cannot reach, so our most elite royal guard will not be able to help you. However, the remaining 3,000 or so of our warriors that Jaldabeth brought along will fight by your side. Our species will not die out as long as there is a king and a single female, so you may use those warriors as you wish. There will be no problems even if they are all killed. That's how it is. You also know the conditions I've laid out in order to triumph against Jaldabeth. Rather than decreasing the demi-humans' numbers with combat, we will take fewer losses if we persuade them to leave his side. Also, they have provided us with important information, and we have finished verifying it. Caspon smiled, and then continued. From what we know, this news is not a trap set by Jaldabeth. On the contrary, this is something we can use to deal with the Zirn. If Jaldabeth finds out, they will be purged, and their prince, the new king, will also be killed. That's what'll happen to you if you betray us. Caspon was threatening the Zirn. Although it was only natural for anyone in a high position to think like that, the fact that Caspon could ruthlessly describe such a development frightened Nia a little. However, once the calm returned to Nia's heart, a question boiled up inside her. Namely, why had he brought her here to listen to their planning? If he wanted Nia to take part in the rescue, all he would have to do was give her an order. It was true that Nia was now a unit commander, but ultimately she was just a squire who was somewhat skilled with the bow. There was no need to explain the operation to her in such detail. And not just that. Don't tell me that they still regard me as His Majesty's squire? I mean, I'm halfway to being a citizen of the Sorceress Kingdom already, right? They probably mean that the Sorcerer King would also be listening to this under normal circumstances. Or maybe they want me to explain this to the Sorcerer King when we see him again. Is that it? Indeed, Nia was still the Sorcerer King's squire. Nia puffed up her chest, and Caspon was slightly surprised at the sudden change in her attitude. Now then, with regards to rescuing the Zirn prince, we have reached the decision that rescuing him during the chaos of attacking Kalincha will be very difficult. Indeed, the Zirn followed up on Caspon's words. Let me tell you where the prince is being held. Vice Captain, I hope you will help clarify details for me. The Zirn launched into an explanation with Gustav as backup. First of all, the great city of Kalincha occupied the top of a hill. It was under the direct administration of the royal family and was protected by thick walls. On its west, near its highest point, was Castle Kalincha. It was intended to hold the demi-humans at bay should the fortress line be breached, and at the same time it was near a major trade route leading to the south. Therefore, it was more sturdily built than any other city in the Holy Kingdom. In addition, Kalincha's seldom used castle was very solidly built in order to withstand sieges. The imprisoned Zirn prince was held within one of the towers of the castle. Since he was in the innermost of the towers that were intended for last-ditch defenses, one could say it was the hardest place in Kalincha to infiltrate. It did not even have windows, in order to protect against aerial attack, and one could not reach it without traveling down an aerial walkway. This tower was now inhabited by a powerful guardian, a member of the water-using Ogrekan known as Vauns. The Zirns were not allowed to go near it, lest something happened to their prince if they did. However, provided their treachery was not exposed, if the guards saw humans who were not related to the Zirns, they would not harm the prince. In fact, they would protect the prince instead. That was what they meant by borrowing the strength of humans. But once the actual fighting begins, if the prince is still imprisoned, we will have no choice but to kill you humans. Since all our fellows who were brought to this land are present. The Zirn's words started to lose coherence, but everyone understood their meaning. It would be too late by then. There was value in rescuing the prince because the Zirns were enemies of mankind. If the Zirn were all wiped out, then there would be no need to rescue the prince. It'll be too late to send reinforcements once the fighting begins. Therefore, the safest and most effective way to rescue the prince is to send a group of elite warriors who will move as stealthily as possible. Squire Nia Baraha, I would like you to command this operation. I cannot. It is impossible for me. Nia responded to Caspond immediately. Normally, gainsaying the prince, who was her supreme commander, would not be tolerated, both in terms of military discipline and social conventions, but at the same time, that order was truly ridiculous. It was simply too much, no matter how you looked at it. I knew you would say that. However, Miss Baraha, this matter is of great benefit to you as well. Caspond narrowed his eyes. They will furnish us with knowledge about the hills and introduce reliable guides there. Nia gulped. She bit her lip, desperately trying to keep a lid on her emotions. How much trust can we place in those words? Once you rescue the prince, the Zerns will respond by rising up in revolt from the inside, at which point retaking Kalinsha will be much simpler. It's certainly better than a conventional siege, and we will be able to take more demi-humans prisoner. The Zerns also say that they will ask around to see which prisoners have the knowledge you desire. I'm not too sure about the details, the Zern added on to Caspond's words. It seems you wish to travel to the Abelian Hills. If you rescue our prince unharmed, our entire species will be indebted to you. Who would refuse to share what they know with a benefactor? In addition, that knowledge is nothing special. The Zern's argument was utterly irrefutable. Refusing them would mean being disloyal to His Majesty. If I let a chance to be useful to His Majesty slip out of my hands because I'm afraid. After calmly considering the matter, she felt that this was her best chance. However, she did not intend to kill herself. Who else will be going on the mission to rescue the prince? Nia looked at Remedios, who had been silent all this time. I'm not going. I can't infiltrate or anything. If you say that, then what about me? Nia thought, and then she looked silently to Caspond. I asked her to go with you several times, but she kept refusing. Therefore, you will be accompanied by that captive. No, that collaborator. HMPH. Captive will do. Captain. It doesn't matter. Vice Captain Montañez, can you bring her over? Montañez left the room with a yes. The Zern envoy left the room as well. It would seem they did not want to let others know that they were working with the humans. Gustav returned before long, but he was not alone. He had with him a girl wrapped in layer upon layer of chains, a girl that Nia had never seen before. She seemed more petite, delicate and younger than Nia. She wore a scarf that blended the colors of dark green and sand yellow in a complex pattern, as well as a strange maid's outfit. Her facial features were exquisite, and even the patch that covered one of her eyes did not diminish her beauty. Nia suddenly remembered what Evli had said, and while she was quite sure who this person was, she decided to ask just in case. My prince, who is this? Haven't you already guessed? She's one of the maid demons who showed up in this city. Nia went stiff. She had thought as much, but it still startled her. She was difficulty rating 150. In other words, she was a monster among monsters. A being which humanity could not overcome now stood before her eyes. However, Nia also sensed something else that startled her. That was the fact that she could still feel such intense hatred with an unbeatable monster in front of her. How could she hold on to such emotions when facing a creature that outclassed her so tremendously? Was it because this maid demon was not radiating an aura of fear, or was it because of her loyalty to the Sorcerer King? Regardless of which it was, Nia sank her hatred for the maid demon into the depths of her heart and did not let it show. If she was careless, she would start berating her as one of the reasons why such an outstanding monarch like the Sorcerer King lost to Jaldabaoth. However, while Remedios had her hand on the hilt of her holy sword, Caspond and Gustav did not seem to be doing anything special on their part. Therefore, Nia could conclude that she did not pose any immediate danger. Otherwise, they would never allow her to stay in the same room as the prince. Murder girl, do not be afraid. Right now I am not sworn to Jaldabaoth, but to Ain-sama. I will not attack. I don't believe you. Ain-sama. That term of address filled Nia's heart with displeasure, as if she was trying to reject the fact that it had been said. However, the maid demon replied to her in a monotone. You do not have to believe me. It is simply the truth. Miss Baraha. It seems that His Majesty somehow managed to usurp control over her from Jaldabaoth during the battle. Nia's eyes went as wide as saucers. Had he actually managed to carry out a non-lethal tactic like taking control of her while fighting multiple opponents, Jaldabaoth and the maid demons? Nia did not know much about magic, and she did not know how difficult such a feat was. If one need an example, it would be like trying to snatch equipment off a very powerful opponent during the middle of combat. If that was the case, then it must have been an incredibly difficult maneuver which only the Sorcerer King could pull off. Nia came to respect the Sorcerer King more and more. However, she had two questions now. She wanted to believe that if the Sorcerer King had done it, then everything would be fine and she could accept that fact. But was the maid really under the Sorcerer King's control? That was the first question. Could it be that she was not actually working for the Sorcerer King, but acting under Jaldabaoth's orders to pretend that she was under his control? And then, the other question was, I understand that you're loyal to the Sorcerer King. But why are you here? Is it because of your chains? It's not like that. The maid demon began to exert her strength, and the thick chains emitted a distasteful creaking sound. Stop that. As Remedios shouted in time with a wave of killing intent, the sound stopped. Even I could break ordinary unenchanted chains. Then why haven't you left this place and gone to His Majesty's side? She had asked because she was hoping that demonic instincts or the abilities of a bound demon would lead her to the Sorcerer King. The maid demon flatly replied, because it's an order. The last order I received from him was to help you. So I will do my best as long as it does not mean my death. Nia was stunned. The Sorcerer King came to this country to seize control of the maid demons. He came to obtain the maid demons, a tremendous fighting force that could make the Sorceress Kingdom even stronger. In that case, his first order to the maid demon should have been for them to return to the Sorceress Kingdom. But instead, His Majesty. What a kind person he is. Is there a king out there who is so compassionate to the people of another country? No, it can't be. Only the Sorcerer King is an exception. His Majesty really is justice. How amazing. I was right all along. Nia struggled to keep the heat from spilling out of her eyes. In that case, what does, as long as it does not mean my death, refer to? If you ask me to fight Jaldabaoth, I will refuse. It will be very difficult to escape if I face him. I see. Nia understood. Caspon had already verified the truth of everything she had said. That was why she had been brought here. So this demon will come with me. Just so. Well, I thought of sending her to the Sorceress Kingdom as an envoy. Compared to that, well, once that's over and we learn information that we can trade, I was planning to have her join the search party we're sending out. That's because it's dangerous. Those people you picked out haven't found anything yet, so we can be sure that he landed in the hills. She did not know why Caspon's instructions were so vague. She peeked at the maid demon's face and saw that it had not changed. She did not look worried. Of course, this maid demon might not know what had happened to the Sorcerer King, and she probably could not imagine that the Sorcerer King was in dangerous territory. However, her blank face still made Nia very unhappy. Most importantly, could she let a demon like that use a familiar term of address like Ain-sama? No, of course not. Nia fumed. Not even she had addressed him in such an intimate manner. ISS Baraha. Ah, yes. Oh no. Nia's face was slightly red. She had apparently forgotten herself due to her distaste for the maid demon. What's the matter? Is something bothering you? Ah, no. It's been only 3 days since the search started, so I think it might be a bit hasty to conclude that he fell there. I see. That does make sense. However, would it not be better to be prepared for anything? That is true. Alright. In that case, Maid Demon-kun, this is the third time I have spoken to you. The day we found you, yesterday, and now. The Maid Demon said nothing and looked at Caspond. If I asked you to go to a certain large city to rescue someone imprisoned there, would you help us? It is like I said yesterday. I will. Ah, good. I understand. Then, I apologize for this, but would you mind returning to your room? Vice Captain Montañez, if you would. He led the Maid Demon away, and they began speaking again once Gustav returned. Miss Baraja, well, I do not know if I need to tell you all this. Possessing this information might mean the difference between success and failure when you infiltrate Kalincha. Therefore, I will speak to you about a few things. The first concerns Jaldabaoth. Caspond told her what they had learned from the Maid Demon. It would seem she knew little about Jaldabaoth. Practically nothing, in fact. She did not even know what abilities or attacks or weaknesses he possessed. In addition, she did not know what Jaldabaoth was doing now or what his objective was. However, she had said that he would need a very long time to recover if he was severely injured. It was like how it would take longer to refill a larger vessel when the water level inside it decreased. And so, after learning about Jaldabaoth, the demi-humans, and the other demons, Nia asked Caspond the question whose answer she wanted to know most of all. Can we trust her? We can't. We should kill her to be safe. That answer had been supplied by Remedios. Nia resisted the urge to ask if she could beat a difficulty 150 Maid Demon, and listen to Caspond's judgment. I find it hard to trust her. This might be one of Jaldabaoth's schemes. She might be a spy sent out in case someone like Mon appears, someone who can fight back against Jaldabaoth. That was why they had asked the Zirn envoy to leave before bringing the Maid Demon in, and had spoken obliquely in front of her. I told you, right? It would be better to kill her. That way there'll be one less thing to worry about. I see, Captain Custodio. That is an option. However, it is very likely that the Maid Demon is indeed under the Sorcerer King's control. That is because she has not been spouting false information about Jaldabaoth nonstop, but replying that she does not know. However, why is she not asking about the Sorcerer King at all? Still, you agreed to hand the rights to the Maid Demons over to him, did you not? Since you did that, once they find out we killed her, they will regard our country as incapable of keeping its promises, you know? Once that happens, no other countries will want to help if anything happens to us. He's already been killed by Jaldabaoth, hasn't he? Remedios's words made Nia look down as she struggled to bite back her anger. Thanks to Remedios, she felt like she had gained the ability to better manage her emotions. We cannot be sure about that. That is why I feel we need to test and use her during the rescue of the prince. If she betrays us and leaks the information, then only the Zirn will be eliminated, which will reduce the number of demi-humans. We will also be able to root out the rat among us. These are the two merits of this option. And of course, if we succeed, we can simply rejoice. Please don't forget about the life of the person who will be carrying out the infiltration, Nia grumbled in her heart. Did you ask the Maid Demon about her own weaknesses? If she betrays us en route, would it not be better to have some way to deal with her? We didn't ask about anything like that. Caspond smiled bitterly. Nia followed suit. Even if she told them, there would be no way to determine if she were telling the truth. They could not tell by looking, and obviously they could not test it out. Well, we're not the ones who control her. Ultimately, she's only helping us because the Sorcerer King ordered her to do so. Gustav was still going on about that, but in truth both Caspond and Nia had realized it already. There was probably only one person present who did not understand the situation. So the infiltrators will be myself and the Maid Demon. Has anyone else been selected? On that point, if you have nobody else to recommend, then the two of you will go by yourselves. For a moment, Nia looked at Caspond because she thought he was kidding, but his face was serious. Allow me to add to the prince's words, but surely an infiltration is best handled by a very small number of people. Am I wrong? People getting in the way would be bad news, which is why we have nobody to put forward. While Gustav's explanation was convincing enough, Nia knew that was not the only reason. It was because of Nia Baraha's situation. It would be all well and good if this rescue operation went well. If it failed, all they would lose was an interfering squire who had grown close to the Sorcerer King and one of the Sorcerer King's minions. In addition, they would lose little even if the maid demon betrayed them. It was perfect. In that case, was it a lie when they said they had to ask Remedios to go before? It was also possible that it was not, and they were just trying to minimize their losses. Nia exhaled. There could be no other answer. This was a good chance to show her loyalty to the Sorcerer King. I understand. I and her, she mused that she was probably a female. The maid demon will go together. Oh, I see. Then we'll be counting on you. Yes. Then Vice Captain Montañez will draw you a rough sketch of the city. Prepare yourself before you leave. Also, avoid combat if any demons close to Jaldabaoth are present. According to the maid demon and the Zirn's information, Jaldabaoth was served by 3 great demons. These 3 demons were the ruler of the Abelian Hills, where the demi-humans lived, the overall commander of the invasion of the Southern Holy Kingdom, the one in charge of 3 major cities, who teleported between Kalincha, Rimmon, and Pranart. That seemed to be it. Therefore, if she was unlucky, the great demon in charge of the cities would be present. The great demon in charge of the cities apparently had no head, and its body was like a withered tree. It was 2 meters tall and had no wings or a tail. It had clawed hands, and its slender body possessed an unimaginable strength. Also, it lacked a head, but it was still able to sense its surroundings, and similarly it could even read. As a demon, it had a truly fiendish physiology. Incidentally, the capital of Hoburns was apparently under Jaldabaoth's direct command, and not that of his aides. May I know who is stronger between it and the maid demon? In the maid demon's own words, she does not know. She wanted to see the maid demon's fighting ability just once. In particular, she wanted to know what weapons she favored and what special abilities she had. If she did not know that, they might suffer an unexpected defeat. The 3 great demons are both generals and lords. He probably feels that demi-humans are not suited for brain work, so he seems to have set up a dictatorial power structure. Therefore, the great demons handle much of the administration and they have not appointed any successors or substitutes. If you can defeat them, you'll be able to deal the demi-human alliance a devastating blow. That would satisfy the victory conditions you have laid out, my prince. Although Jaldabaoth might lead in person once his wounds have recovered. Right now, I don't think he'll force himself to take the field. However, if you can take the limbs, then victory will be close at hand even if you do not crush the head. That said, your main priority now is the rescue, so avoid combat if you can. I understand. In that case, when will you begin the rescue mission? I was planning to set out as soon as possible. However, I would like to speak to the maid demon before that. I see. Then how about in 2 days' time? Nia replied in the affirmative and received permission to meet the maid demon. After that, she left the room. While she had a heavy burden to bear, her stride was energetic and her face was filled with determination. The flames of madness that came from losing her purpose recently received new direction, and they became a blinding light that illuminated her path. There was still something she could do, and her path led to His Majesty. When she thought of it that way, even traveling with a dangerous demon was nothing. The maid demon lived in an average-sized house with a garden. It had probably belonged to a wealthy resident of the city in the past. During the savage takeover of this city, part of the beautiful decorations had been destroyed, and statues which should have been there had been smashed. Still, the house itself was intact, and it did not seem like the cold air outside would leak in. Still, even a cheap and crude house could boast that. Every opening that could be considered a window had been boarded up tight, as though whoever did it were determined not to let air flow in or out. It smacked of paranoia. On the whole, this was a cage, or some kind of isolation unit. It was a place for someone who was nominally a minion of an undead being or a demon, but who was also the subordinate of a hero who had come to save the Holy Kingdom. It was a place which had been built for many purposes, with a sense of impending danger and aversion blended in as well. Well, she wanted to ask what good several loops of chain around the maid demon would do. The Sorcerer King had not yet officially introduced her, so they could not be courteous to her. The wall around the house had been hastily repaired, but it lacked the crucial element of a barred gate. Had they taken it away because there was not enough steel to go around? In its place was a hastily built guard post beside the door that looked like a temporary hut. The man standing there was a powerful-looking man in full armor, the paladin who had been appointed commander of this place. Nia handed him the scroll which Caspond had prepared. The paladin quickly scanned it, then returned the scroll to her while handing over a lit candlestick. It was daytime, but the boarded-up windows meant that light could not penetrate inside. According to the paladin, the maid demon did not need light, so the interior was pitch dark. Nia went through the door and looked around the desolate garden before heading toward the house. She walked over a shattered brick road, and when she reached the main door, Nia took a deep breath. She used the knocker on the door, but there was no response. Nia hesitated, and then tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. She cracked the door open, and peered into the darkened interior. There was no sound from the inside, and it was as silent as a mausoleum. After gathering her resolve, Nia entered. There was no light inside, and no servants. Right now, there was nothing in this house but Nia and a difficulty rating 150 demon. Sweat beaded on her back. The candle she held shook unsteadily. Everything outside the candle's small circle of illumination seemed to have been sucked into the darkness. "I'm Nia Baraha. I'm here to see you." "Where are you?" Nia shouted into the darkness, but the darkness did not respond. Was she sleeping? She shouted again, louder than just now, but there was no response. Nia screwed up her determination, and stepped forward. This was a two-story building. It had many rooms, and checking them all would take quite a lot of time. Still, even without doing that, Nia might be able to pick up something with her acute hearing. She began with the first floor. Nia prepared herself for the worst and took a step forward. "Yua." Someone called out to her from the side and a face appeared in the light. "Aye." Her shoulders twitched, and she unconsciously backed away from the face that appeared. Her back hit a wall with a thud. She could not have missed that face. It had appeared beside her as though it had passed through the walls. Felt surprisingly good. She saw the maid demon throughout her terror-lined eyes. Her face was blank as she watched Nia panic. "Damn demon," Nia grumbled. Was even the circlet of iron will helpless to prevent the feeling of surprise? Her heart was pounding like a drum, and it felt fit to burst. If that was the demon's aim. Nah, it couldn't be. "Why did you come here?" "I came here to ask you something. In 2 days' time, I want the two of us." It would probably be too dangerous to explain the operation in detail since she did not know how far she could trust her to go on a certain mission. "Got it. So I think it would be good if we could share what we know and discuss what we can do." Sharing information is important. Understood. Whether or not she would really share information would depend on the upcoming discussion. "Alright, this way." The maid demon moved with rapid steps, as though she did not care about the lack of light. It would seem the paladin she had met earlier was telling the truth. As Nia trailed behind her, she studied the back of the maid demon. She was a beautiful girl whose slender limbs and pretty face all evoked a protective desire in others. Still, it all seemed like a charade to Nia, who knew the truth about her. The chains she had been festooned with in Caspion's chambers were nowhere to be seen. However, the chains were meaningless to begin with. This demon was simply made in the shape of a human girl, and in truth she was a monster that could surpass dragons. As she considered that even a slight pat might be the death of her, her stomach began to ache. "I'm very fragile, so please be gentle with me." As she heard Nia mutter those words reflexively, the maid demon stopped in place, then turned around and said, "Got it." Even Nia's eyes could not make out any changes in her expression. Not knowing what she thought made her a little uneasy. They continued on until they arrived at the reception room. There was only a single candle for illumination. "Sit," she pointed to the facing chair. Nia sat down. "Drinks." She suddenly produced a bottle of brown liquid. It was just like how the Sorcerer King took out objects. As Nia watched in surprise, she opened the cap and inserted a straw. It was made of a bizarre material that looked both soft and hard at the same time. She hoped that muddy liquid was not poison. It would be very distressing if she accidentally forgot that it was harmful to humans. However, if she was really a subordinate of the Sorcerer King, then she would not be able to refuse. Nia emboldened herself and moved her tongue. She took a mouthful of it, and swirled her tongue. It was not as bitter as she expected, and it did not prickle like needles either. "It's sweet." "What is this?" Nia took one mouthful after another. While it was sticky and needed some effort to suck up, it was cool, refreshing, and delicious. Chocolate-flavored. Calories are a little high. Around 2,000. But don't worry. Eating good food and getting fat is a long-cherished ambition for women, according to a certain great person. The change in tone made Nia peek at her face again, but she was still expressionless. The words, "great person," made her think of the Sorcerer King, but Nia had the feeling she was referring to someone else. "One another? May I?" The maid demon probably knew that it would be a shame to finish it up in one go, and she took out another bottle. Nia was also a girl, although the orcs had wondered if she was a female, and it was hard for her to reach out for something that would make her fat. However, this drink was in a small container, which meant there was not much of it. Eating too much of anything would make one fat, so all she had to do was eat less at dinner to cancel it out. "I have no idea what these calories are or how much 2,000 of them make, but she said it was a little, so it should be fine." It was a sweetness that was completely different from that of fruits or honey. This time, she would savor the taste as she drank it. She took a mouthful. "Ah, no, that's not why I came. I came to talk." The maid demon sucked on the straw and drank in the same way as Nia had, while her eyes signaled Nia to continue. Well, first, if you have a name, could you tell it to me?" "I'm Nia Baraha, but you can call me whatever you want." According to Evil Eye of Blue Rose, each individual maid demon was completely different from the others in terms of appearance and equipment. In fact, the maid demons she had seen behind Jaldabath at Caspion's room were completely different from this one. Maybe there were different names for different types of maid demons, much like goblins and hobgoblins. While there might not be a need to know its individual and race name. If the maid demon really was a subordinate of the Sorcerer King, then as a squire, it would only be polite to treat her with all due courtesy. "Paha, Shizu is fine. I'll call you Nia." "Shizu, is it?" Nia had expected to be addressed as human, so she was mildly surprised. Is the maid demon's personal name Shizu? Or is Shizu her race name? Well, both of them work for me. Is that your personal name? Personal name? An excellent question. Yes. Personal name. Ah, forgive me. I don't understand demons that well. Demons. Huh. This. Shizu seemed to be mumbling. Nia could hear all of it, but since she was talking to herself, she decided not to take a jab at her. Alright then, Shizu. What can you do? Also, there were several maid demons, so why did the Sorcerer King choose you? I'm good at ranged attacks. Also, because I was MVP, the best. Best? Ah, is that it? So at that time you were the most troublesome opponent, is that it? Shizu chuckled. That said, her face did not seem to change. However, Nia had sharp eyes, and she understood after observing her carefully. There was a very slight change in her expression. She seemed proud. At the same time, Nia relaxed. It would seem she had not been easily controlled because she was the weakest. I can use ranged weapons too, but in turn I'm not good at close combat. We don't have a frontliner. Shizu sipped her drink in silence. Got any ideas? What are we doing? Infiltrating a city and rescuing a VIP. She could not mention the word Zirin yet. Then we need the ability to move stealthily. Better not to have a clanky frontliner making lots of noise. Yes, that's right. Can you move quietly, Nia? I had some training, so I'm probably better than before. However, I'm not fully confident in myself. Can you cast spells like invisibility, or do you have magic items that can do so? Nia shook her head. I see. Work hard then. Yes, I will. Then, could she really trust Shizu? Could she believe that she was under the Sorcerer King's control? If Shizu was still a minion of Jaldabaoth and was pretending to be a subordinate of the Sorcerer King in order to spy on them, then telling her about him would be very bad. However, it was very likely that the Sorcerer King had wrested control of her from Jaldabaoth. In that case, not trusting her enough would be throwing away her best trump card. And so, nervously and haltingly, she spoke. In this place, I have the duty of being the Sorcerer King's squire. Shizu's artificial, beautiful face did not move. I heard. He said she had vicious eyes. And then he lent her a bow, which was rune-crafted. Show me. Alarms blared in the corner of her mind. Jaldabaoth had seemed quite interested in it as well. Still, if Shizu really was in the Sorcerer King's employ, she would not be able to refuse. Nia handed over her bow, and Shizu took it. However, she only glanced briefly at it before returning it to Nia. This is very good. You should let many people see it. She delivered the line calmly, so it felt like she was reading off something. However, she was probably imaging things because Shizu was not looking at the bow with interest. After all, she had spoken this way ever since she had first seen her. Thank you. Yes. About what happens after the mission. Shizu held out a hand to interrupt Nia. You should let many people see it. Why is she so hung up on this? Shizu probably noted the bafflement on Nia's face, and continued. He lent you an excellent runecraft weapon. You should spread the word of Ain-sama's greatness. The word Ains made Nia twitch. Making this clear to her was her top priority. His Majesty. Nia sensed from Shizu's blank face that she had not been clear enough, and added, That's His Majesty. Calling him Ain-sama is too familiar, don't you think? This time, it was Shizu whose face twitched a little. No, at a glance her face was still blank, but Nia was sure that her expression had changed. It's not too familiar. No, it is. Normally, you wouldn't address him by his name, but by his title. You just came into his service and haven't been of use to him yet. What's with that face of yours? Nothing. However, I want to call him Ain-sama, and not His Majesty. Was the expression that could be vaguely glimpsed past that blank mask a look of pity, or was she crowing her victory? Even Nia did not understand, but it made her mad. This thick-skinned newcomer had come out of nowhere, and the fact that she was trying to cozy up to the person she so revered made her very unhappy. Nia decided not to pretend anymore. While she wanted to act as a squire and deal with her politely as a person of the Holy Kingdom, she decided to give up on it. It did not matter if she was dealing with a monster which knew no equal throughout history or in the present day. She had to make one thing clear. Someone like you. I was told to do so by Ainzu-sama. Call me Ain-sama, he said. So I can call him Ain-sama. I can call him that. Left unspoken was, but you can't. Nia's body trembled. No, she was a demon that the Sorcerer King had bound into his service with magic. Maybe it was natural that she would go that far. No, that can't be. You must be lying. You're lying like a demon would. How could he have explained in such detail in a situation like that? Shizu shook her head, as though to say, good grief. It is a shame, but also true. Well, I know you must be shocked. I understand very well. Still, that is where you stand now. However, if you work for him, someday you will be able to call him Ain-sama too. Work towards it, Shizu. Nia. It is a predecessor's duty to teach those who come after them. While that was a pretty good line, had Shizu not come after herself? Still, the fact that she could call him Ain-sama made her feel that maybe she was the senior after all. It was a little hard to accept, but first, I want to thank you. Don't mention it. One must show kindness to those who know of Ain-sama's greatness. Nia's eyes widened in surprise. She had only been bound to him for such a short time, so how had she gained such respect? No, that simply proved how great the Sorcerer King was. Yes, that's right. I know very well how great His Majesty is. After Nia answered, the two of them looked at each other for a while. Shizu was the first to move. She swiftly extended her right hand. Nia responded instantly and without hesitation. While Nia was mildly bothered by the fact that Shizu had not taken off her glove, the two of them shook hands on the table. Given how much she reveres the Sorcerer King, it would seem she really is under His Majesty's rule. Otherwise, she would not have called him Ain-sama, but instead she would have called him His Majesty like me, so she would not sound strange. Was she being naive? However, at this point, Nia was very confident in her beliefs. She understood that Shizu's loyalty was genuine. Just like how the teeth of two cogwheels fitted together, they could understand each other because they were fellow worshippers of the same god. Speaking of which, it's easy to get along with you. As a human being, you have a bright future, Nia. I have very mixed feelings about getting along with a demon. We're talking like this because you're speaking the truth about how great His Majesty is. Shizu nodded. Although I feel it doesn't matter what happens to Nia, I will bring you back safely to this country. I promise. Thank you. Nia's gratitude was honest and straightforward. Shizu's difficulty rating was 150. She was on a level where even Blue Rose would be hard-pressed to win against her. It was only right to be grateful for the protection of such a demon. This was doubly true if she was a subject of the Sorcerer King. Although, there was one thing she had to clarify with her. Can you swear that in the name of the Sorcerer King? Shizu raised a hand, like she had been called on by a teacher. This I swear in the name of the Supreme One, Ainzu-Algaon-sama. However, if you die and are resurrected, that still counts as keeping my word, right? Safe. No, I think that's slightly different. The two of them looked at each other. To Nia, there was a big difference between the safe and coming back to life after dying. Quote. However, that was just barely within the bounds of what she could compromise with. If you don't become a demon or one of the undead, but come back to life as a human, that ought to count, right? That should be fine. Alright. There was a slight change in Shizu's voice, which had been in the monotone all this while. She sounded like she was motivated now. While you're not cute, this is specially for you. Shizu took something out and went to Nia's side. Then she pressed something tightly onto Nia's forehead. Hey, what? What is this? Startled by that inexplicable action, she tried desperately to peel it off, but she could not. It was stuck on so tight that it would not budge. It was very frightening. What's this? Hey, wait. I'm scared. It's okay. It won't hurt and it's not scary. Look. Shizu showed her something with a number 1 and a strange design. It might have been a letter on it. It was made of some kind of paper that gleamed with a frightening luster, and the one on her head was similarly slippery. She had heard of talismancy, so was that a kind of talisman used as a magical medium for that art? No matter what, she could not have given out a trivial item like this, so it must be some kind of magic item. That was what sent a chill down Nia's spine. What if she could not remove it for the rest of her life? Why did you have to stick it on my forehead? Aren't there better places to put it? I'm like a little sister. Quote. Although she had heard something quite shocking, there was a more important matter at hand. Anyway, take this off. At least stick it on my clothes or somewhere else. It can't be helped then. Shizu took out a small bottle and placed a drop of something on Nia's forehead. After that, the tightly stuck-on object peeled off easily, like it had never been attached at all. She picked it up, looked at it, and saw that it was the same as the one Shizu had showed her earlier. Sticker. It needs to be pasted somewhere obvious. It would seem she would have to paste it on. Making Shizu angry would do no good, so Nia did as she was told. Yes. Are we done? No. After this, I wanted to talk about finding His Majesty. No. To welcome him back. I'll go too. We need a lot of preparation. After all that is over. Really? I promise. But I hope we can make time to finish the map of the Demi-Humans Hills. That's true. Demi-Humans? A moment after she agreed, a question suddenly popped up in her heart. Right now, she had not told her anything. Even so, why had she suddenly used the word Demi-Human? Could it be she heard about him landing in the hills from Prince Caspond? What's wrong? I got it. I'll talk to the people on top. Pleased to meet you, Nia. The pleasure was all mine, Shizu. Although she was still mildly bothered by the sticker from just now, Nia stuck out her hand, and Shizu responded. They both shook hands again. You don't think His Majesty is dead after all, do you, Shizu? Shizu's eyes went wide. What did you just say? Actually, His Majesty fell to the east, and then he didn't contact us again. Since His Majesty can cast teleportation spells, the fact that he still hasn't come back makes me think something happened to him. So, what if His Majesty? It hurt too much to speak any further. She hesitated, because if she said it, it might come true. To this, Shizu responded with what was probably surprise. He's fine. He's not dead. My binding is the proof. Why are you crying? Her tears were flowing on their own. The Sorcerer King was really alive. She truly believed that he was not dead. But sometimes, the uneasiness that suddenly reared up in her mind left her unable to sleep. Many people had told Nia that the Sorcerer King was fine. But all of them sounded like they were just trying to comfort her, to try and keep their own worries at bay, and not because they truly believed it. But at this moment, someone had told her that with absolute confidence and certainty. And Shizu was the proof that the Sorcerer King was alive. That allowed Nia to relax at last. It was relief, like that of a lost child finding her parents, that made Nia weep. Shizu produced a piece of cloth that was printed with the same design as her scarf. It was probably a handkerchief, and covered Nia's face with it. And then, she rubbed forcefully. She was not so much violent as inexperienced, but the place where she rubbed hurt a lot. Shizu pulled the handkerchief away, and Nia's snot stretched out into a bridge. There's snot on it. Super shocking. After hearing Shizu's distinctly shocked voice, there was an indescribable look on Nia's face. Therefore, she took a handkerchief out of her own pocket and broke the bridge of snot. I'll wash it.